Hello, my name is Jeff Steinwinder, and thank you for tuning in to our discussion today about the development of a sustainable energy profile for the state of Mississippi. Now, before we jump right into it, let me give you a quick and very brief background and introduction into the Magnolia State. So today's population of Mississippi is approximately 3 million, and projections to increase over the next few decades. It is home to over 11 million acres of farmland and over 19 million acres of forests. To give you your bearings, the mighty Mississippi River is on the western boundary with Tennessee to the north, Alabama to the east, and Gulf of Mexico to the south, where Mississippi is also one of the highest receivers of precipitation, ranking third amongst all 50 states. All right, so jumping right into the energy consumption of Mississippi. So in order for, let's say, the farming equipment to till the large amount of agricultural fields that Mississippi has, the airplanes to dust those crops, and the trucks to haul those goods, a lot of energy is required. So on average, Mississippi consumes approximately 391 million BTUs of energy per year, which is more than the amount of energy consumed at the British Virgin Islands in 2014. Much of this power is provided by natural gas, followed by nuclear and coal facilities, shown by the graph. So this one thought, just to keep in mind during our presentation, is what would the sustainability or a sustainable amount of energy consumption for a state of this size, a state of this population, and the industrial demands of Mississippi? All right, so the major resources in Mississippi is crude oil, as well as nuclear electric power, and as well as coal and other renewable energies. So for crude oil, Mississippi in 2018 produced approximately 2 million barrels of oil. For natural gas, it produced approximately 50 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. And for coal, over or approximately 3 million tons of coal. So for crude oil, that's 35% of the total resource production of the state. So we know we have all of these sectors of energy and how it's being produced, but where is it being consumed? That's the question. And so we see that for Mississippi, the industrial sectors and transportation are the largest consumers of the energy that Mississippi produces. All right, so moving right along, let's discuss a few thoughts about the environment and the effects of all of this energy production on the environment. So we know that fossil fuel power production and a few of the renewable energy power productions releases what we call greenhouse gases. So let's focus on CO2. Okay. So to understand how much CO2 is emitted into the atmosphere, we must consider something called CO2 intensity. So this means how many tons of CO2 is emitted into the atmosphere per gigawatt hour of power production or energy production for a certain specific facility. So let's say that we have a crude oil fired power plant. All right. So we send 1 gigawatt hour of electricity over to our city, and we emit 780 tons of CO2. So let's say our facility is natural gas. That only emits 480 tons of CO2 into our atmosphere. Now let's send another 1 gigawatt of electricity to our city from, let's say, a coal-fired power plant. It emits a whopping 1,380 tons of CO2 into our atmosphere. So converting some of these numbers into something we may understand, we see that the CO2 emissions for Mississippi has a total of 65 million metric tons, where approximately 26 million metric tons sourced from power production alone. So we've seen in previous slides that Mississippi is heavily reliant on natural gas. This is also seen here, where most of the CO2 emitted into Mississippi's atmosphere is sourced from natural gas-fired power plants. A close second, well, not really close, but second place is coal-fired power plants at 22% of the total. All right, so we've seen how Mississippi is reliant on fossil fuels such as natural gas, as well as nuclear and a little bit of coal. But we haven't really discussed renewable energy. There's a reason for that, because we see that the total state energy, renewable energy capacity is only 435 megawatts, which compared to other states, this could be considered almost obsolete. But there's been many strides for this by the state government to increase renewable energy production. For example, there's been a recent solar PV facility right outside of Meridian, Mississippi. So the state consumes around 141,000 megawatt hours of biomass energy and approximately only 34,000 megawatt hours of solar. But one interesting fact is that Mississippi does produce a considerable amount of biofuels, which is approximately around 54 million gallons per year. So let's look into the resources, I should say, of Mississippi. So most of the oil and gas production in Mississippi will be located in the south region of the state, as you see on your photo here. Anything south of Jackson is predominantly where oil and gas will be produced. If we look specifically, we see the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale skirting the very southwestern tip of the state, which is where you will see predominantly most of the oil and gas production, where just in 2018, Mississippi came in 14th of crude oil production with around 2 million barrels of oil, and Mississippi came in around 21st out of all 50 states with approximately 40 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So if we consider water as a valuable resource for Mississippi, which it is, we see that Mississippi is right above average on precipitation. So this can also be an indicator of all the valuable agricultural products that's being produced, all of the trees are being watered from this. So understanding and evaluating water resources is very important. Forests in Mississippi are also prominent. We see that most of the southern counties of the state have a 75 to 90% forested value to it, which is also an indicator of the possibilities of biomass that can be obtained from our state. Which takes us to the figure on your right, where the EIA has produced a biomass electricity generation in the United States figures, where we see that from 2005 we have seen an increase in biomass electricity generation in the south of the United States. So a few current energy related problems. I wanted to point out very briefly a few risks from hurricanes, with Mississippi being right next to the Gulf of Mexico. So in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit the coast and destroyed or almost hurt, I should say, many of the offshore and on-land oil platforms and oil and gas rigs. This also caused a risk to many of the environments around some of the oil and gas pipelines as well. Also, another problem is the fracking that's being used to extract the oil and gas from Mississippi's the Tuscaloosa Marine Shale area. So as we know, some of the chemicals being used in these fracking fluids can be hard to treat and can pose risk to the surrounding environment. So as for future energy demands, we know that Mississippi population is going to be increasing in the next few decades. So we also see a slight increase in demands by population and by industry. The peak demand by population is in 2030 with a slight decrease in 2040. However, the following slides show my ideas of a new energy profile for Mississippi. So I would like to I suggest focusing our efforts on nuclear, on natural gas, on solar PV, and as well as biofuels. So some of my thoughts is that natural gas would be approximately 67% of the total, nuclear around 20%, biomass 3%, and solar PV at 10% of the total electricity generation by source. We know that natural gas is not going to be that great of an increase. However, having increased nuclear and solar, I believe that both of these sources of energy could be increased, one with nuclear with additions and modifications to the facility at Grand Gulf, and solar PV. We have a lot of surface area here in Mississippi, and could be we could collect more energy. So a few more points that my idea is that coal and petrol will be phased out by 2025. We improve transportation and community connections, community outreach to our farmers and agriculture producers, and that we consider life cycle energy use in all agriculture production. Thank you very much for listening, and we learned something today on the sustainable energy profile for the state of Mississippi. Thank you.